Good afternoon, friends. Happy Monday. Now I know this video is going to come out tomorrow on a Tuesday, but today in recording, it's Monday. As you can see, I've got another project on the lift. It's another bike I'm going to part out. I picked up this 1993 FatBoy in a parts deal this last weekend. I've already listed a lot of the small parts on eBay. A lot of things I've already taken off. The engine I had sold a few weeks back. I'd gotten that before I got the whole bike. Then recently got the transmission. I think I've got a deal worked out on that, and that should be sold. And the rest of the parts that were on this bike are already on. Now I need to strip this down the rest of the way and get the rest of the parts off. Also, today, I've got a brand new Milwaukee tool that I received recently, and I'm going to try out. I haven't used one of these yet. They're 3/8 ratchets, the long reach, or I guess I don't remember what the heck they're called. I think it's the long reach model. Anyway, I've never used one. I'm kind of excited to try it out today, so we're going to take off some of these small parts with it and see how it does. One of the neat features with this is you could actually ratchet with it. So I'm going to attempt that now to get the tanks off of this bike. And once I get them loosened up, I should be able to, push the button and release everything the rest of the way. We're going to start with this left tank here. In using this, I'm wondering how much power it actually has. And on that top bolt, I didn't even have to turn it. I just pushed the button and it backed everything out. So I'm wondering how much torque this thing actually produces. I think it's going to do pretty well for me. I've always wanted one for getting in tight spaces and not having to use a ratchet. It is a little bit heavy, but it's one of those things I think I'll get used to. Now with the left tank out of the way, we'll move to the right side. We'll get the right tank undone, and then that will have all my wiring available to the neck and the main harness here, which I'll start taking all those parts off as well and then hanging them on the side of the bike. I'm trying to keep all the wiring together, obviously selling it all as one, complete harness, or as complete as possible. I'm sure some of the ends have been cut. I can see that it's been spliced into a couple of times, and obviously, that's not something I can control. That was already done. Anyway, let's get that other tank off. Now that I've got both the tanks off, I can see all the wiring here. I'm going to leave this stuff the way it is for right now. I'm going to work on some of the smaller parts here, getting the coil off, getting the oil bag ready to be removed, obviously getting the foot controls off, the kickstand, the rear fender struts, and then we'll see what's left from there. So let's get after getting the coil off and the oil bag. I've never parted out a FatBoy or a Softail like this before, so a lot of this is going to be new for me. And looking at the setup here, the oil tank is actually right in the way. So I'm going to start with taking that out first, then I should be able to get the coil off, and then I guess we'll move to the struts. Unfortunately, this is a learning curve for me, so I'm just trying to figure it out. So we'll get this oil bag off next. Okay, now that I've got the oil bag out of the way, I can go ahead and get this coil out of the way, and then we'll work on these struts next. Just figuring stuff. Keep reverting back to my good old-fashioned hand tools, because that's what I'm used to working with. Sometimes, it's nice to have the new, electric tools, but then it's also kind of nice sometimes just to work with a good old set of ratchets or wrenches. Okay, let's get these struts removed. We'll put the new ratchet to the test here and see exactly how well this thing's going to do removing these hex screws. See if we can just pull the trigger on it and see if it has enough power to remove it. And it did. Those came out quite a bit easier than I expected them to. So I'll go ahead and take the other one off the other side, and then I'll put these aside. It's a pretty nice set of fender struts, so I think those will sell quite well. Now I'm going to go ahead and get this kickstand mount removed, and of course the shift linkage and all that good stuff, get that part off. Then I'll work on the other side, the brake side, get that done. I also have the exhaust mount to take off yet, and then that should be pretty much everything for the lower side of the bike. I know eventually I need to remove the swing arm and all of the apparatus here and then get the shocks out. I'm trying to decide what direction to go once I get these lower parts off. But let's start here. Let's get this undone next. And of course, like any good Harley, it's a combination of different things. I've got 1/2-inch bolts and I've got some 1/4-inch hex screws. I'm not exactly sure what's going on here. Some miscellaneous hardware on the back, so we'll see how easily this comes apart. These are kind of haphazardly stuck in there. Odd what you find on these old bikes. Now I've got the whole kickstand assembly removed. We'll go ahead and remove this back plate here. Looks like that's a standard size. Well, I guess we do have one more hex head in there. I guess it's going to be a combination of tools today. Okay, now we've moved over to the right side of the bike. I'm going to go ahead and remove this rear master cylinder assembly. So I'm going to go ahead and take the brake line off first. I'm going to get my catch pan underneath this. I'm going to assume that it's probably full of brake fluid. I don't know that it is or isn't. I did not use those brakes in moving the bike. I did use the front brakes, so I know those are full of fluid. So I'm going to go ahead and undo this first with the tray underneath it, get the fluid to leak in that, and we'll get the assembly apart. Now I'm using a 3/8 inch 12 point to remove this stud on the brake master cylinder. Now I know that there's a specific tool for this, or there's supposed to be from what I've been told, but I don't have it. And these work really well. So I'll use this on the rear and front master cylinder. We'll get this bolt removed here, this banjo bolt, and we'll let the fluid leak out. As I suspected, it's fluid. We can probably pump this a little bit, move the fluid out of it. And that takes care of most of that. Now we'll go ahead and we'll remove the master cylinder. Looks like these are pretty loose, so I should be able to loosen those by hand and then pull off this brake master. This nut was already removed, so I don't have to remove that. Hopefully I have that in the parts bin that I got with this. I know there's a bunch of hardware and miscellaneous baggies that came with this, and I'm hoping I have that. I'd like to have this as complete as possible when I do put it up for sale, but I may not have it. Okay, and with the rear master out of the way, we're left with these two studs here, and I believe that's all that's holding this in place. So I'll go ahead and get these undone. This should be a 9/16. This, I'm not sure what size this is. Obviously this stud is stripped, so that stud's probably going to go in the trash. That one's in by hand. Unfortunately, where it really counts here, it's bent and it's stripped. So that is no good. Okay, with the rear master removed, I'm going to move on to this rear exhaust bracket. I'm going to pull this off next. And then I think I'm going to work my way up to pulling the dash. I'd like to have the dash and the wiring out of the way. And then I'm not sure where I'm going from there. But for now, let's get this out of the way. We're going to see how tight these are. I'm actually going to just put the 9/16 on there and pull the trigger and see what it does. There's a fair amount of torque on this thing. It's impressive to see it kind of pull out of your hand and really start moving these bolts. Now, of course, I assume these things weren't torqued or they've been sitting and maybe they're a little loose, but they are rusty. So it is doing a heck of a job pulling these things out. With that out of the way, I'm actually going to remove this rear brake line. So I want to get that out of the way, pull the whole brake line assembly for the rear out. So that way I'm not fighting it the whole time. Plus it doesn't need to be on the bike anymore. So I'm going to loosen this stud right at the caliper and go ahead and pull this line out of the way. And that's one less thing to deal with. Okay, with the brake line out of the way, we're going to leave the rear caliper in place. This is actually going to stay on the bike for now. I do believe I'm going to use this rear caliper on the chopper project that I'm building. I'm not exactly sure yet, but for now, it's going to stay out of the way right there. I'd love to be able to get in here and get these pegs out of the way, but I really don't know if I have enough room to do it. So I'll probably wait until I can get them out when the rear wheel's out of the way. Next, I'm going to move to the rectifier here. We're going to go ahead and pull that next. And then I'll probably get the lower tank mount off and then work my way up to this wiring harness. So let's get after this here. Next up, working on the wiring here. Obviously, I have to get all the plugs out of the way here and get this wiring harness loose from the bike itself. It's kind of weird to see the setup here. I've never torn into one of these bikes before, so it's kind of just strange to see how these things are actually all mounted. Kind of unique, that's for sure. But I'm going to go ahead and get these plugs undone and get them moved out of the way and then start undoing all the wiring from here so I can start backfeeding all the wiring back into the main harness. Okay, from this point I have the dash separated from the rest of the wiring harness. So now what I need to do is go ahead and get the speedometer removed and then get this dash removed, and then I have those parts separate. It's looking like it should be a fairly simple job, just unclipping the clips here from the speedometer. Then I can pull the speedometer out, and then I've got a bolt here and two bolts here that actually hold everything onto the neck, and then the dash itself is free, and then I've got the rest of the wiring harness connected here, bolted in place. And I believe once I undo those things, then I'm all set. So I'm going to go ahead and work on getting these unclipped here, and get the speedometer removed. And unfortunately, like a lot of these bikes, it's got an aftermarket speedometer showing 35 miles on it. You see a lot of this stuff. I don't know if the original one died or somebody was trying to sell something that it wasn't actually what it was, misrepresenting it. You never know with these kind of old bikes. People do all kinds of crazy things. Anyway, I know the speedometer actually does work because I rolled the bike around enough to see it actually working, so I can prove that works, but it's not an OEM original. Try to keep all these spacers together so that way this dash goes as one kit. Never actually seen something like this where it's got these giant spacers on here. When you deal with a shovel head, it's got very small little spacers that just bring it up just a little bit, or on some of the FL models it doesn't have one at all. So this is new to me as well. It's kind of neat pulling this old bike apart because I'm learning all these new things. I don't deal with a lot of Evos. It's pretty much shovel heads and back. I really like the old stuff and the simplicity of it. So when you get into these newer ones, it's pretty different. Anyway, we'll go ahead and we'll pull this here, and then I believe that's it for the main wiring harness. And with that, I have one Softail main harness. I know this has been cut a little bit. Most of it looks like it's there. I've got all the connectors here, and those should have been for the hand controls, and I'm not sure why I don't have those ends. They were already cut off, so I'm not sure where those went or why, but anyway, I've got the main harness here now. So with that being said, I think it's time to drop this bike down a little bit and probably start pulling off hand controls here, and then working on getting the rest of this thing to a bare frame. Of course, it's always easiest to pull the brake lines while they're already mounted. That way you're not fighting things and it's already in a good secure spot. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen the brake line on the caliper and on the front master cylinder, just so that way they're ready to be taken off. I'm actually going to pull the whole front brake line. That way I can let it drain here. And of course you wouldn't be doing brake work without making a giant mess, right? I always get brake fluid kind of everywhere. Skin hates it, so it starts to hurt a little bit. Anyway, I want to get that top master bolt undone, that banjo bolt up there, so it's loose, and then wash my hands to get this brake fluid off. Alright, so now we're at the point of removing hand controls. I'm going to go ahead and pull off the clutch side first, then of course the brake master next, and then we'll go ahead and get the handlebars removed. So I've got the two bolts here, and then I'm going to pull the top clamp on the bars, and probably sell the bars separate from this clamp setup. I'm not really sure. I may sell them together. I don't know yet. But I want to get those done, and then while it's on the ground, I think I'm going to work on pulling the shocks, and then of course the rear swing arm, wheel, and all that good stuff off the back. And of course, with the bars still attached to the triple trees, we're going to go ahead and loosen up these bottom bolts. We're going to try the new ratchet out and see if it'll loosen them without turning it. Not sure if it has enough power. Surprisingly, it did. Usually these things are Loctited so tight on there, there's no way to get them to spin, even with a long ratchet. Usually it's a giant pain in the butt to get them off, but these came off nicely. And there was no Loctite on them, so that helped out a lot. I will leave them together for now. Eventually I'm going to pull that top clamp off. Okay, we're at the point where I'm going to go ahead and remove the rear wheel. I believe I've got the frame supported well enough with the jack and of course with the front wheel chock. So I'd like to go ahead and pull this rear axle, get the wheel ready to be removed, and then have the belt out of the way. Then I can pull this rear swing arm, and that's the idea, to try to get this rear end buttoned up and taken care of. So let's pull this rear axle nut. Next we'll pull the rear splash guard, then we'll go ahead and pull these rear pegs, and then I'll work on getting these bolts out for the rear swing arm. So let's go ahead and get the splash guard out of the way first. That should give me a ton of room to be able to get to everything else I need to. I'm going to use the big 1/2-inch drive Milwaukee on these bolts here. So we'll go ahead and get those started to be loosened, and then I'll go ahead and work on the shocks next. With a pair of 3/4-inch wrenches, I should be able to ratchet these two shocks out of place. I'm going to give that a shot. I should have just enough room to get in here all the way. They definitely don't give you a lot of room to work underneath here to get these shocks out of the place. I know on the early model Softails, it was a pain in the butt to try to change the oil for the transmission. I know you had to drop one of the shocks, and I've done that in the past. So I knew that was kind of a pain in the butt, but I've never disassembled one of these fully. So obviously I'm just kind of figuring all this stuff out as I go. Now I need to get these 2 bolts out for this rear swing arm. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen them up the rest of the way and pull the swing arm out of the way. Well, friends, this is as far as we're going for the day. I did, get this bike disassembled as far as I'm going to be able to go. I know the front end is still on it. I'm going to pull it off later. I'm probably not going to get to it today, unfortunately. I've got cleanup to do around here, and I'm getting ready to leave for the day. It's the end of my day. Of course, if you liked the video and you found it informative on how to take a Softail apart, the disassembly process, from what you saw, I know it wasn't a full bike teardown, but it was, a partial teardown, and it showed, some of the pivotal things on it. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. Of course, feel free to comment, leave some comments below of the things that I'm doing right or I'm doing wrong. I always appreciate the interactions. If you have not subscribed to the channel yet, hit that subscribe button. Also, if you've noticed, I've changed my channel landing page, and it actually shows all of my different pages that I'm on, my Facebook, my Instagram, and my eBay page. So if you haven't followed me on all those, go ahead and give me a follow on all those too. I try to post different content on each one of the platforms, and of course eBay, it's all the parts that are coming off these bikes that are for sale. Of course, the sales for these bikes and these parts fund my other projects. They fund my life. They pay for my, my electric bill and my water bill and all those things. So if you're looking for parts and you want to support me in some way, that's a great way to, support me, and I appreciate it. As always, friends, I thank you for sticking along till the end. We'll catch you next time.